Immigration attorney, a principal of migrationcouncil.com, and today's topic is going to talk about modern immigration issues. John, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
How long have you been an immigration lawyer?
Well, pretty much since I graduated from law school. In fact, immigration law was the last course I took at Richardson School.
You're kidding. The last course you took.
The very last course
and the career path you chose.
And my adjunct professor recruited me out of the class and said, why don't you come down in town and we'll talk about what you might be doing with this immigration law stuff.
Now, I don't want to date myself at all, but did you cross over with me when I was a law professor and you were a student?
I graduated in 2000.
So we did cross over. That's terrific. But what it says is, because I got there in 2000, had you taken my course,
well,
you might be an intellectual property law professor. So you took this course. It was the last course of your academic career.
And I had just the greatest time. The adjunct professor is a fellow by the name of Jim Stanton. Mm-hmm. He's still practicing immigration law here in Hawaii. He's a great guy, just a fountain of immigration knowledge, just a brilliant guy. And so I had a really great time, just straight out of school, right into immigration law.
That's terrific. And so you basically did your apprenticeship with him.
That's right. You know, prior to going to law school, I had been working for an international organization, the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR. So there's a part of that, dealing with refugees and asylum issues and things like that, that intersects and overlaps with immigration law. So I had some background in it and maybe a little bit of affinity. But working with Jim was definitely what tied me down to it.
And a highlight, I'm sure, of the academic experience.
Yeah, it was a good thing.
Well, it was so good that you decided not only to graduate from the law school and go into this career path, you came back to the law school. In what capacity?
Well, I came back to take over the immigration law clinic. They had a clinical program, and basically in law schools you can have different types of learning experiences. One is the standard lecture course, and of course then there's the different types of editorships that you get involved with Law Journal. One of the other attributes is the clinical experience, where you actually take on live cases or simulated cases. And we did that. We took cases from immigration court, we took cases from the community, we were doing cases from military families, quite a number of different people coming in. Because the school was able to put students on the job, we were able to do this work for no fee whatsoever, and we got quite a good result. We did that for about 2.5 years. Unfortunately, there wasn't a long-term funding stream for that, so I had to go back out to private practice. but it was really actually a highlight of my career to be able to do whatever cases came forward without thinking about how much is this going to cost the client.
Well, I hope by the end of today's talk with you, there is more knowledge in our audience that this kind of work at the law school is critical work, not for just training students, but them providing potential clients with a level of access.
Yes, the really great thing about the clinical education opportunity is, one, you're giving law students real life experiences. They're getting their hands into cases, looking at the files, doing the research with a real outcome, not an imaginary what if or check the box for your multiple choice, a real case with a real outcome. Really changes someone's motivation on how they deal with the facts. The other part is that it's a community service. It gets the law school community interacting with the community at large in a very real way. You know, here in Hawaii, about 19% of everyone in the population is born in a different country. So,
that's an outstanding number.
Well, it puts us in the top 5 of states in the United States in terms of percentage.
Right.
Numerically, we're still a small state, but in terms of the percentage of immigrants in our state, you know, related to the population at large, we're usually within the top 5.
And you can see the immigration influence at every level and at every sector.
Well, absolutely. You know, one of the interesting things, although we have a really high percentage of immigrants in our community, the profile of Hawaii immigration is completely different than on the mainland. You know, way more than 60 or 70% of our immigrants are coming from Asia and the Pacific Basin.
Right.
So whereas on the mainland, you're looking at a lot of people from Latin America, a lot of people from Canada, coming in from Africa, coming in from Europe. Here, we predominantly Asian and Pacific Islander immigration. So it's a completely different sort of dynamic.
Do you think because of the makeup of the population already who are residents, do you think that there's just an assumption in the community that everyone must be a resident because we have such a large Asian influence, and so immigration issues seem small?
I think that if you're comparing Hawaii to, say, a really homogenous community, say on the mainland somewhere, you know, a small town in Iowa or something, people from someplace else are going to stand out much more than they do here.
Okay.
Because our population is so diverse, people do tend to sort of melt in. You see when someone walking down the street, you don't immediately assume, oh, that's an immigrant. You just, well, it could be JoJo's cousin. You know, it could be like that.
Which is a positive outlook on one level. But
well, it's absolutely positive in the sense that we generally don't have an anti-immigrant sense in the community. The people pretty much are accepting people from other places. On the other hand, it makes some of these issues sort of invisible.
right.
And that can be a little bit of an issue.
Because
honestly.
when an immigrant has to deal with certain challenges that we'll talk about throughout the segment, there may not be the level of sensitivity or empathy in the community because people are not sensitized to it.
Yeah, that actually I think is a significant issue. It is the assumption that if the problem isn't apparent and in your face, then there's no problem. And we do have some issues that are ongoing, and this spans the whole range of immigration issues, from questions about family immigration, how are families affected by the immigration process? How is the business community affected by the immigration process? How is law enforcement involved in the whole immigration issue? We have some rough edges here.
So these are three things we're actually going to talk about today. But before we talk about these very specific family, business, and deportation issues that you reference, can you set the landscape for us of where immigration is right now politically?
Oh boy, it's a mess.
Okay.
Quite honestly, it's sort of a disaster. Everybody has been hearing the news that there is a big push for immigration reform, and just in the last couple of weeks, it's up again in the news. Last year, 2013, the Senate, the United States Senate, passed a bill, Senate Bill 744, with the intention of making a comprehensive reform of the immigration laws across the board.
Right.
It was a really big package. It was a thick bill, and it really had a lot of good stuff that really would have helped straighten out, not perfect, but really would have helped straighten out some of the issues that are clogging up the system right now.
So what happened to it?
Passed the Senate, did not even get up for a vote in the House of Representatives, and there it sat. As you know, the legislative year closes down the bills. If it doesn't pass in that bill, 1 year, it's over. They have to start over again. So that's what has happened. It's now locked up, and it has not been reintroduced in the current season. It appears that the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, is not willing to bring this up in the House of Representatives. He's waiting for more support from his caucus, and it doesn't appear that he's going to get it.
Now, you have some insight into why you think there is this holdup on this bill. Can you share that with us?
Well, yes. There's basically, and there are people who, I'm an immigration attorney, so I know about immigration. There are people who are better at politics. But what it looks like to me is that there is a minority of the Republican caucus who are absolutely dead set against letting this go through. And it's maybe 25 to 35 seats, mostly in the South, not exclusively, but densely in the South, from congressional districts that have little or no, not like us, not 20% of the population,
right.
no, but very homogenous communities that don't really feel a particular stake in reforming the immigration system. So they've been very resistant. So much so that they have persuaded John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, to just sit on this and wait till there is more consensus. Well, there's never going to be more consensus than we have right now. Recent polls say that consistently over 75% of the American population want to see the immigration system reformed. If 75% isn't enough,
then what is enough?
Right.
What is enough?
Where do you go from there?
Especially in those states, as you say, like Hawaii, that have a dog in the fight.
Well, absolutely we do. Although many people here, again, maybe the idea that it's sort of an invisible issue, many people don't really recognize how big a stake Hawaii has in the whole immigration issue. Why Hawaii? What does it matter to us? That's something that happens, in California, where they have all the farm workers and so on. And we hear everything about Silicon Valley. They're up in arms. They can't get enough of their workers and engineers. Well, what's that got to do with us? Actually, all of that has to do with us.
Okay.
All of that connects to what we are facing here in Hawaii.
Well, we're going to talk about some of those issues when we talk about the business aspects of it, but I want to sort of circle back on the political side. What can we do, as you say, if 75% of Americans think it's important, but we can't get certain representatives in the House to move? What can we do? What can our administrative leadership do? President Barack Obama, his cabinet, what can they do?
Well, the president has made some moves, in terms of the powers that are invested in the executive branch. One of them, he instituted a policy within the Department of Homeland Security to what they call prosecutorial discretion, and put out to the law enforcement community that, we've got something over 11 million illegal immigrants here in the USA, but most of them are law-abiding. Let's concentrate our resources just on the people who are really violating the terms of any reasonable hospitality. The people who are doing crimes, the people who are in gangs, people who are doing drugs, people who are doing human trafficking.
Right.
Let's pinpoint those people and get them out first.
Right.
That's met with some limited success. But that's one policy that he was able to set that out on his own without Congress. But he got some blowback on that. He really did. It wasn't everybody completely in favor. Another policy that he's done that's been somewhat more well accepted is that, and again, this has been strictly administrative or executive action, made it possible for the family members of active duty U.S. military people and also reservists, if they have undocumented members of their family, in the normal course of events, those people are not allowed to regularize their status. And he's made it possible for a pathway for the family members of military members to regularize their families. Now, these are not great big numbers, and it's sort of around the edges. I think that that's the sort of policy that gets a certain amount of respect because, we've been in a couple of wars. If you're willing to die for the USA, we ought to be able to figure out how to regularize your family. So that's another one. The third one, also not completely, universally accepted, is this program called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA for short. And that's the one where we say, well, what about these youngsters? They call them the dreamers, that have come over into the United States from lots of different countries, predominantly Latin America, but many others as well. Came as children. Their parents brought them in. They didn't have anything to do with that. Here the rules are that up until high school, they can attend school. Afterwards, they're kind of stuck.
Yes.
They have no particular...
Which way can they go?
They have no
Right.
papers. Most schools were not allowing them to register. They can't get a Social Security card. You know, they can't apply for jobs because they can't fill out the forms. They get up to the high school level and then they're stuck.
That's right.
So this program allowed, on a temporary basis for 2 years at a time, okay, fill out the form, show us that you've been in school, or that you are in school, that you're ready to enroll in the military. Show us that you're doing something useful. Show us that you haven't been involved in crimes, and we'll let you have work permission for 2 years, and you can stay, and that's renewable. How many times it will be renewable is still up for grabs. So you can see that in terms of executive action, there's been at least 3 things that the Obama administration has been able to do around the edges.
So let's recap those 3 things before we go to a break.
Okay.
The first thing.
The first one is the prosecutorial discretion program.
Okay.
Where they...
Well, we'll talk about it later,
Yeah,
but let's just...
prosecutorial discretion, letting people who are not doing crimes
Right.
be not the focus of our deportation activity. Second one is allowing the family members of active duty and reservist military people, give them a pathway to regularize their status. And the third one is for the young people, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals.
And with these 3 pathways, migrationcouncil.com is available.
We do, well, in each of those, we do pro bono work,
Okay.
pro bono publico, work that we do for free for the public. But we also take cases where someone wants to hire an attorney. We do assist them with that.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a break. My name is Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law. My guest is John Robert Egan. He is an immigration expert in town right here in Hawaii and a graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law. We'll be back in a few seconds. Good. We could do this all
Investing
day.
in Hawaii, creating
How long is the
communities, and
break,
providing
Jay?
for the needs of our state. Collateral analytics, empowering
Okay.
the real estate industry to make better informed property investment
Okay,
decisions.
minute and 10 seconds.
The foreign trade zone,
You're good.
bringing the benefits of the foreign trade zone programs to
Let's
Hawaii
make
businesses and
A
entrepreneurs.
distinction
Galen Ho,
between
the
illegal
senior
and
executive of
undocumented.
BAE Systems,
If there is
a
one.
global defense,
It's a
security,
matter
and
of
aerospace
semantics.
company.
There's
Hawaiian
no
Electric
real
Company,
There's no difference.
and its
Okay.
affiliates,
Is
Maui
it a
Electric
shift
and
in the
Hawaii
language
Electric
to
Light
try to
Company on Hawaii Island.
decriminalize?
The Hawaii Energy Policy
Well,
Forum,
I think actually
incorporating diverse perspectives
the
to
widespread
design a
use
flexible
of
and forward-looking
illegal
energy
alien
strategy.
is an attempt
Hawaii
to actually
Energy,
Criminalize.
the state's
Okay,
energy and
okay.
efficiency program,
And there's a useful
created
distinction
to
there
help
that
Hawaii's
for the most
residents
part,
and businesses
immigration offenses
adopt
are
a
civil
clean
offenses,
energy
they're not
lifestyle.
criminal offenses.
Hawaii
Let's hit
Gas,
that.
helping
Then
Hawaii
we'll go
achieve
to
its
DACA.
transition to clean energy
Right.
and a better energy
Exactly.
future.
That
Hawaii
really
Pacific
has-
Health,
That resonates.
bringing
with- that has to
technology
get
and
out.
teamwork together
Send
to
your taxes in
transform
later,
healthcare
come
in
on.
Hawaii.
Right.
No,
A
it's
high-tech
violated the law, we
development
fix it.
corporation,
Right.
attached to
That's a big deal.
DBED,
That's right.
is the state's
Yeah.
leading
Civil law
technology
offenses.
agency.
All
The
right, so
Scheidler
let's
Family
touch on that, then
Foundation,
we'll go back to
supporting
DACA.
educational, cultural,
5.
and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
Welcome back. My name is Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law on the ThinkTech Live Network streaming series. My guest today is John Robert Egan, an immigration expert in town, and we're discussing modern immigration issues nationally and those that affect us in Hawaii. So we left off, John, talking about a couple of terms, and I wanted to get your response to these terms. We often talk about illegal aliens, but the latest measures like DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a different type of term. How would you distinguish the terminology illegal aliens from undocumented from this newer status DACA?
You know, as an immigration attorney, I don't like to hear people use the phrase illegal alien, because you can't take a person and make them illegal. People can do illegal things and their activity is illegal, but the person himself, it's a pejorative. You know, and I think that the widespread use of the term illegal alien is just that. It's used for the purpose of singling this group of people out as the other, the people who don't have a legitimate right to the basics that we would give each other, you know, mutual respect, you know, a fair chance at making their case. Due
Constitutional privileges, right?
process. Right. So we make them illegal, and then we don't have to really take their situation seriously. You hear the term now, undocumented alien. It's the same thing. I mean, really, we're talking about the very same people in the very same circumstance. But actually, many of the news media have now incorporated that into their style guides. Don't say illegal alien, it's a pejorative. Use the term undocumented. Now, that has also kicked back a bit of a reaction. People say, well, you're just trying to, cover over, sugarcoat the real problem. But one of the problems with the concept of illegal alien is the idea that these people are all criminals. Well, actually, most immigration violations, not all, but the vast majority are civil violations. Now, if you're not an attorney, maybe that doesn't ring a bell, but we have the criminal code where the things that you do should land you in jail, and then you have the civil code where you might get a fine, you might get a reprimand, or you might just be told, get in line. You know? If you don't file your taxes on time, you haven't committed a crime, but you have broken the law. So what do? Well, you file them late, and you pay a fee.
Pay a penalty.
That's a civil offense.
That's right.
So most of the immigration offenses are civil violations, not criminal. And the idea that we should start to use language that makes them all criminal, I think it's wrong. And I really appreciate that most of the major media outlets have now come across to using a less pejorative term.
Good points. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Now, you were educating me earlier in the show that much of immigration centers around family issues and family unification. What does that larger point, family unification, mean, not just for immigrants, but for all of us? And then how is it impacting DACA?
Well, I think you started off asking about some of the political dimensions of all of this, and I think DACA really does represent a political solution to a problem, not a full, complete, and final solution, but a temporary solution. This idea, there was a bill put before Congress. It's been put out for each of the last 9 years, the DREAM Act, to allow the children of immigrants that have come in illegally, if they've been careful, they've been in school, they've been doing the right things, give them a chance to get their paperwork straightened out. And I think politically that's been pretty well received, but they never have managed to pass that law. So in 2013, President Obama said, well, okay, we're going to give these people some way to hold on until they do straighten out that law. And that was this Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Interestingly, the initial estimates here in Hawaii were that there would be about 4,000 to 5,000 young people here in Hawaii who would be qualified for this program. The most recent numbers that I have seen, and they're not perfect statistics, but it looks like somewhere just less than 1,000 have taken advantage of the program. So there's another 3,000 people out there who could be taking advantage of this program but haven't yet done it. Why not?
Right. And these may seem like small numbers in that larger 11 million that you referenced, but it actually could be viewed in Hawaii as a microcosm of the larger national implications.
Yes. In fact, across the country, although they've had almost 1 million people sign up for the DACA program, the estimates were higher, that there would be something like twice that or maybe 3 times that number who would be qualified in principle. There's just not a high degree of trust in the immigration community, immigrant community, that if they come forward, they give them all their personal information, they make it clear who they're with, where the family are living, that this is not going to somehow come back to cause them difficulty.
Exactly.
Now the program is set up. They say, no, we're not going to use this as an enforcement tool, but it's, considering the amount of anti-immigrant sentiment that you see commonly, even wait and see the comments at behind this this little film we're doing today,
right?
And you'll see that there's anti-immigrant sentiment out in the community. They know that. They know that the law enforcement community has been looking for them for years.
Right.
They've gotten used to living sort of in the shadows. I think that's part of it. I think here in Hawaii we also have that whole idea that our immigrant community is heavily Asian, heavily Pacific Islander, I think there's a real hesitance to put the family at risk in any kind of way, and not just for law enforcement, but other cultural issues, shame,
right,
embarrassment,
right,
things like that are impeding this. I'd like to see more activity there. When it first came out, together with some community-based organizations, we did a series of workshops to just let people know how this worked. Brought in a lot of young people, and we got their paperwork done, quite a few of them. But we should have more.
I tell you what, and I'll personalize this, as a new mother, I can't imagine being faced with the possibility of not having access to my child.
Yes, it is that deep. It really is. When you look at some of the family issues involved, the splitting up of families over a question of status seems pretty harsh. Now you can't get around it. The fact is that you can't just have no border at all. You can't just say, "Oh, come in free, no problem. Just find yourself a place and we'll get you a green card." No, that's unrealistic. Never going to happen. But at some point, we have to really look at what we're doing to families. One of the statistics that's just amazing is over half of the people who are here illegally have been here for over 10 years and have U.S. citizen family members. Right,
because their children were born with that status.
Or maybe they get married to someone.
Maybe they get married, right.
And how do you break those families up? There's a price to pay for not following the rules. But is that price just a little bit too high?
Okay.
I wonder about that.
So with DACA, this cooling off period, if you will, this 2-year period, what can those children do and what can their families do to perfect their status?
Well, unfortunately, there is not a pathway from the DACA program to a green card, permanent residence, or to citizenship. That is not part of the program yet. The original notion, and I believe this is what the president intended, was that they would get this 2-year period during which Congress would act. Congress has not acted. There's no movement in Congress at this point to fix this. So what do we do? I think we just have to keep active. We have to keep talking about these issues. We have to, maybe 75% isn't enough. Maybe we got to get up to 85 before this thing breaks. I think coalition building is really important. I think that small number of people, the minority of people who are dead set against this, need to be clearly identified as a small minority, that they're holding the rest of the country back.
In essence, hostage, really.
Yeah, I would say so.
So the way a law school like ours, for example, could get involved in this is to maybe restart our clinic.
Well, that would be great. And I'm probably a little bit long in the tooth to go back and take that project on myself. But there's a lot of really good young talent, good smart kids coming out of that law school. And any number of the ones that I've seen come out and get interested in immigration law could very, very competently move that project forward. Funding is an issue. Nothing happens for free in academia.
That's right.
There's salaries, there's space, there's equipment, all of that has to get put together. But it's not a big number. And if you really think about that idea that we're number 4, 5, or 6 in terms of the number of immigrants in our population, my own opinion, if our law school really intends to serve the community, that's a pretty significant part of the community that right now is underserved.
And so it would be a 3-prong approach, really. It would be a fundraising arm, getting or attracting someone who believes in this issue. 2, doing advocacy, not just the representation.
That's right.
Because there is an advocacy piece here to move that sort of gerrymandering force.
Yes.
And then 3, actually doing the technical work.
Well, it's funny you put that in those terms, because that was exactly how I framed the class. I told them, you're going to have to take some of the transactional work. I want you to get into immigration court, but I also want every single person in our clinic to do an act of advocacy. And I'm not telling you what you want to say. If you want to say you're anti-immigrant, say that too. It's fine, but I want every person in this law school clinic to do an act of advocacy, whether it's writing a op-ed sort of editorial, whether it's getting out into a community event. But every single one of them, advocacy is absolutely part of it.
Doing some tabling to actually provide information, real information, on either side of the issue.
To the whole picture.
Okay. Well, I think we'll try to take a break.
Okay.
I'm Danielle Conway. You are watching Life in the Law in the ThinkTech series. I'm speaking with my guest, John Robert Egan. He is an immigration expert in our community, and when we come back, we'll be discussing the business side of immigration.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of ThinkTech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our ThinkTech talk shows. If you didn't know it, ThinkTech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Conway. We're returning to speak with John Robert Egan. He is an immigration lawyer in Hawaii, and he has done some phenomenal work with the immigration clinic at our law school, but he's also the principal in migrationcouncil.com, offering pro bono as well as fee-based services for those who require immigration assistance. John, we left off talking about the DACA program, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit because sometimes we get a sense that immigration is just about one or two prongs, either the family unification prong or the deportation prong. But there is a very important third piece to this, and what is that?
Well, employment-based immigration is clearly a big part of this picture. The United States has always had an employment-based opportunity for people to come in from other countries. And we do it pretty much across the board. We do it at the high side, you know, with academics. You know, you certainly see if you actually polled your faculty at the University of Hawaii, you'd find out that quite a number of those people were recruited from overseas.
Especially in the engineering department.
Well, for example. But in the community at large as well, you know, in the high-tech sector, in the finance sector. Certainly here we live on the hospitality industry. Take a look at who's running our hotels. And it's an international crew. And all the way down through the economy and out to even our agricultural sector, where we have people out picking our lettuce who are immigrants. And so how do we manage that? You know, here in Hawaii we have an amazing history of plantation agriculture, and everybody kind of knows that the diversity that makes up Hawaii is based in agricultural migration. That those people came in to work on the plantations. First the Chinese, then the Japanese, Portuguese, Filipinos, Puerto Ricans, you know, on and on. We've had a constant stream of people coming in to work the land and settle. We don't have that system anymore. That's gone. There is no way for us to realistically bring in agricultural labor right now. And how do we imagine that we're going to do diversified agriculture without a labor force?
That's right.
It isn't going to happen.
And I mentioned to you that, you know, in the Wall Street Journal, they're talking about the next best thing is to get into agribusiness. Well, you can send your kids to college to get into agribusiness, but that doesn't mean they're going to actually do the labor.
We don't send our children to college to learn to pick lettuce.
That's right.
Now, there are many, many skilled parts of the agriculture community. I don't know if you know this, but my first degree, my Bachelor of Science, is in International Agricultural Development.
I did not know that.
Well, I haven't done much with that. But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of really interesting and important things, and especially you look at a place like Hawaii where we have such an interesting opportunity in agriculture. Well, we've got the tropical crops, we've got specialty crops like Kona coffee, we've got the tropical fruits, we've got flowers and plants, we've got all kinds of very interesting niche markets out there.
Right.
But if you look at those, each and every one of those is a hand labor crop. There's got to be people out there picking that. So you go to school, you learn agricultural economics, you learn agricultural management, you learn pest control, you learn bioenergy, you know, how to create energy from your crop plants. All these different things, very technical. But the person who gets that master's or their PhD from CTAR, the College for Tropical Agriculture, they're not going to go out and pick those crops. That's not what we're training them to do.
That's right.
Where do those people come from? And we don't have a system in place for that. Until we do, I think we have a limiting factor on the expansion. And we talk about this in many different ways. When we want to diversify our economy, but we also are talking about the notion more and more of food security. We want to grow that stuff here. Well, we're going to have to harvest it here.
That's right.
Well, whose hands are on those plants to harvest them?
That's right.
Immigrants.
And that feeds into our movements in sustainability, locally grown product.
That's right.
So we need to think about the entire spectrum, soup to nuts.
That's right. And you talk about that spectrum, you go from the so-called low-skilled labor that come in as immigrants to the high-skilled labor. The other side of this is, and certainly here, your whole enterprise here, ThinkTech, is based in promoting technology enterprise here in Hawaii. Absolutely important, critical to our future, critical to giving good jobs to our kids. But take a look at the technology centers across the U.S. You could use technology centers and the density of employment-based visas as proxies.
Right.
You talk about Silicon Valley, the highest density of H-1B and L-1B visas in America is Silicon Valley.
And just for those who don't know, H-1B
is a visa for a professional worker.
Okay.
And the L-1 is for transferring people from an international organization, you know, an international company into a United States operation and back and forth.
Gotcha.
So that international mobility for the talented, the high talented people in the technology industry, absolutely critical. Without that, it becomes very difficult to get to critical mass.
And it's not as if there is not a need and a place for this type of new growth, both in our economy, but also in our geography.
Well, yes. You know, one of the complaints that you often hear is, why are we giving these jobs to immigrants? Well, the interesting thing is, you talk about how this fits into the economy, the studies are not absolutely clear. And I'll be frank about that. It's not absolutely clear, but the consensus is emerging that every immigrant who comes in to do one of these high-tech jobs is generating a job and a half or two other jobs in the economy.
Right.
So we're not actually giving jobs away. We're creating jobs at a pretty significant rate. And when you talk about things like entrepreneurship and innovation, and you see how many immigrants are involved in doing that. In the Silicon Valley, 25% of the new startup companies have an immigrant founder, well above their numbers in the population. So, and it's the same here.
That's right.
The same here in Hawaii. We have the same sort of pattern where people come here and they're just dazzled by the opportunities that are here in America.
Right.
And they go and they create new businesses. Those new businesses are creating new technologies, creating new jobs, creating new vitality in the economy. Why would we want to be inhibiting
Why would we
that?
turn that away?
Why?
Exactly. And then, by way of geography, it's not as if that we have every city filled to the brim with population.
No, in fact, some cities on the mainland have now started programs to encourage, to invite in immigrants because the potential for urban renewal. Now, New York City has an active program, Detroit, Philadelphia. In my own hometown, I grew up my first years in San Francisco, California. The toughest neighborhoods in that city were taken over in the 70s and 80s by Southeast Asians and now have completely gentrified.
Right.
new businesses. People thought, oh, you can't even walk down in that neighborhood.
Right.
Now people are going down there Saturday night because that's where the good Vietnamese food is.
Exactly.
And nightclubs,
Right.
stuff like that. I mean, it's a
And
completely
like you
different
said,
view
that's a bustling economy.
That's right.
And that's a byproduct
of immigration.
of immigration.
Because people are looking for opportunities. They don't come here to hang out. That's another one of these very negative stereotypes.
Right.
People are coming here because they want to get on welfare.
Right.
Some do.
Okay.
No question about it.
Okay.
Some do. But most of them are here because they want to get an opportunity and get ahead.
Yes.
They want to get their family forward. They want to get their kids educated. They want to make a new life. And to do that, you got to get out there and
You
work.
got to get out there and work.
And they do.
Interesting. So, more on this business aspect of immigration. You mentioned, for example, the coffee industry.
Yeah.
What's the
boy.
makeup of the coffee industry, and how are immigrants actually furthering that industry?
Well, you know, I want to be a little careful not to put the spotlight on any particular industry.
Sure.
But we talk about agriculture in Hawaii. We talk about the fact that it's labor intensive, the kind of agriculture that we do here. But we have some real high points. I mean, everybody in Hawaii knows about the Kona coffee industry. It's a world-class industry.
And we're proud of it.
Absolutely proud of it. And it actually has a heritage side of it as well. There's a legacy of entrepreneurship in those small farmers, especially along the Kona coast, Kealakekua side. But now, if you go to those farms and you really were paying attention to who's picking those coffee beans, you're going to find that it's not people who were born here.
Right.
And if you look real close, you might find that many of them are lacking papers.
Right.
And you could take that out to any number of our different agricultural industries right now, and you might find that those invisible, undocumented people in Hawaii are busy at work, keeping what we consider to be sort of our brand identity commodities, coffee, tropical flowers. We're looking, you know, some of the salad greens, the exotic fruits. Those are all being picked by somebody.
Well, when I go to the supermarket, I'm always looking for Hawaii grown.
That's right. That's right, because we have good crops here.
That's
we
right.
have good food, and we're capable of doing more. How do we get more production without more labor? I don't think that equation works.
And as you said, we're not singling any industry out, and we definitely aren't trying to draw attention to them in any negative light, because thank goodness they're providing employment for all types of people.
That's right.
But this is interesting because around the mid-90s, there were types of amnesty programs that recognized the reality of the situation and responded with a framework to
Well, I'm maybe just a little bit more skeptical.
Okay.
Back in 1986 and then again in 96, there were some changes made to the immigration laws. When they got to the point of how they're going to deal with agricultural labor, they basically put a fudge in there.
Okay.
They started up, and now everybody who's been employed ever since 1996, no matter what you do in the USA, you have to fill out the Form I-9.
Right.
Well, for many years, the workaround was you just take those I-9s and you stick them in a box and you put them in the barn.
Because the requirement was to fill it out.
The requirement was to fill it out.
You don't
and
have
put
to
it on
send
file
it.
so that it would be there if anybody inquired.
Gotcha.
And nobody was inquiring.
Gotcha.
So that was the cutout for the agricultural industry. They sewed up that loophole.
Okay.
And now what? We're looking at, I mean, not so much here because we don't have a huge agricultural industry here, but take a look at what's going on in California. You have farmers who are closing down their farms and renting land in Mexico to grow the same crops because that's where the labor is. They can't get them into the U.S. anymore. And then they're selling that commodity back in your local Safeway.
That's right.
And so we're outsourcing farming.
And can I stretch this one more iteration?
Sure.
What used to be farmland is now fracking land.
Well, right.
And so we don't know whether that is a good business to be in, but we sure do know what agribusiness does for us.
Well, we know that agriculture has been the mainstay of our American economy for generations. Certain states it's absolutely critical to their well-being, like California. I think that it is a critical part of our future here in Hawaii. So I think this all gives us reason to try to figure out how to make this immigration reform thing actually happen.
Exactly. Now, we mentioned that undocumented status could attract some type of response by the government, particularly Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Right.
We have to talk about that for the benefit of our viewers.
Okay.
What has been this response and increased response to identifying undocumented immigrants?
Well, in a very practical way, it's a numbers game.
Okay.
The Department of Homeland Security is still relatively new. It was set up after 9/11 in 2001. It's now the largest law enforcement agency in the U.S. government, and its budget is bigger than the budget of the FBI, the CIA, the Drug Enforcement, all combined. It's become huge. So when you have that much firepower, so to speak, they got to do something with it. I think that the people who they have tasked to do this job are good people.
Okay.
Especially, I mean, I talk to these people, it's part of my job. I talk
Right.
to people here locally with ICE. They're doing a lot more than picking up aliens.
Okay.
They're checking out drug dealers and
Okay.
human trafficking. They're protecting us.
Okay.
Don't ever underestimate what these people do on our behalf. But at the same time, the amount of resources they've got so big that the numbers have gone up. Barack Obama will be the first president to ever deport 2 million people during one presidency. Never has happened before. Absolutely unprecedented, the number of deportations that are going on right now. Because you've got the resources, you know, you can't hire people and say, I want you to enforce the immigration law, and then tomorrow when they come to work say, but I don't really mean enforce the immigration law. So the law is there, it has to be changed. I think that Obama's administration has tried to do some things around the edges, but it's really around the edges.
Okay.
That big 11 to 12 million person problem, it's not going away. It's not going away. And until we fix our laws and give some kind of a solution to that problem, it's only reasonable to expect law enforcement, that's what they do. They enforce the law.
They enforce the
You
law.
talk to these guys, that's what they say. That's why I took this job. I want to help clean up. I want to be, you know, on the side of people who are making the laws work.
Right.
Well, the law is a mess.
And
That's what they're doing.
That's what they're doing.
So the result is 2 million deportations rather than 2 million problem-solving situations where you look at the family and say, should they stay? Should these people stay? Is he a criminal? Get rid of him. You know, is he, you know, a welfare cheat? Get rid of him. No, it's just get rid of all of them.
Right.
Even the kids that are getting honors degrees.
Because the mandate is so
Because
broad.
the mandate is so strong and the funding is in place.
It's in place. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up our discussion with my guest, John Robert Egan, an immigration expert in town. He is a principal in migrationcouncil.com. I'm Danielle Conway.
Castle and Cook, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics. Empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The Scheidler Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
I'm Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law, and sadly, this important topic has to come to an end. John Robert Egan, can you sum up what we've talked about today and the importance to us nationally in Hawaii?
Well, it's not something that fits into an easy soundbite, but the bottom line is we have a dysfunctional immigration system right now. Even the people who are charged with implementing this law know it needs to change. We have to figure out a way to make it change because it's impeding family unification. It's impeding innovation and entrepreneurship in the business sector. It's keeping businesses from having the kind of talent that they need free-flowing in the world economy. And it's even down to the point where if we don't fix this immigration situation, we're going to start watching all of our food prices rise and rise and rise. We won't even know why. Bottom line, it's time to get this done, and the political obstacles just have to be moved.
So at this point, we need more advocacy, even to add to the 75% will in our community to move on immigration reform.
Absolutely. That's what we need.
Okay, well, thank you very much for giving us so much to think about. John Robert Egan from migrationcouncil.com. I'm Danielle Conway. You've been watching Life in the Law on the ThinkTech Live Network streaming series. Thank you.